Chapter 1. You are listening at FameTV.info. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. On the streets of Luo City, in the drizzling rain. In a limousine, a middle-aged tycoon with gray sideburns, Zhang Yuwei, was making phone calls one after another. After hanging up the last call, Zhang Yuwei rubbed his swollen temples. There were too many things to do in the company lately, and he was a little swamped. More importantly, he did not have much time left. Yes, he had a terminal illness. It was liver cancer. Zhang Yuwei did not plan on telling anyone about this news, including his family, because he did not want his wife and daughter to worry about him. He hoped that after taking care of his own matters, he would leave a substantial inheritance for his family. This way, he could be considered to have fulfilled his duties as a husband and a father. At this moment, Zhang Yuwei's gaze passed through the car window that was covered with water droplets. He noticed the words, bookstore, on the door sign of a shop not far in front of him. When he thought about how he had never spent much time with his daughter in his life, Zhang Yuwei felt a wave of regret. Now that he had been diagnosed with a terminal illness, perhaps it was time for him to show more concern for his daughter. He didn't want to regret it when he was on his deathbed. After pondering for a moment, he said, Shaoli, stop at the bookstore in front. The driver.com bodyguard responded and slowed down. The luxurious limousine was parked in front of an ordinary, even slightly shabby bookstore. It was really out of place. Moreover, the person who was about to enter the bookstore was a rich man wearing a handmade high-end suit. This made it even more out of place. Under the umbrella held by Shaoli, they arrived at the bookstore's entrance. Zhang Yuwei said softly, wait for me at the entrance. Shaoli nodded and replied, yes, Director Zhang. This bookstore didn't even have an automatic door. It was Shaoli who helped Zhang Yuwei push it open with his hand. When he pushed the door open, Shaoli took a quick glance at the store. The interior was basic and simple. Other than some simple wooden bookshelves, there was almost nothing else inside. The next moment, the door closed gently. It was still drizzling on the street. It was gloomy and somewhat depressing. Under the incandescent light, rows of bookshelves quietly lined up in the bookstore. The bookstore didn't have air conditioning. In the silence, there was a hint of chilliness that was unique to rainy days. Zhang Yuwei adjusted his suit and walked to the teenager section, following the simple signboard hanging on the ceiling. After looking at the books, Zhang Yuwei quickly picked one with a fairy tale style cover, The Little Prince. I think my daughter will like it. With a sense of anticipation, Zhang Yuwei took the book and was about to go to the front desk to pay for it. At this moment, he noticed a strange sign in his line of sight, Immortal Cultivation Technique section, Immortal Cultivation Technique. Zhang Yuwei thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. He rubbed his eyes and looked at it carefully. It was indeed the Immortal Cultivation Technique section. Almost everyone in the world knew what immortal cultivation meant. In short, it was a cultivation method that allowed cultivators to transcend the limitations of the mortal world and become immortals. However, such a thing only existed in stories and novels. Would a bookstore in the real world sell such items? After a short moment of daze, Zhang Yuwei couldn't help but laugh at himself. Seriously, he was already in his 40s. How could he still believe in such a thing? He was about to die, yet he could still be so muddle-headed. Then, he was about to bring The Little Prince to the front desk to settle the bill. However, after taking a few steps, Zhang Yuwei stopped. He lowered his head and frowned slightly. His liver was hurting again. For some reason, he recalled what the chief physician Zhou, who was wearing a white coat and had a calm expression, said last month. Your condition has deteriorated to this extent. You don't have long unless there is divine intervention. You can prepare for your funeral. When a chief doctor from the most authoritative hospital said something like this, it was undoubtedly a death sentence for Zhang Yuwei. It was precisely because of this that he was so overworked. Before he left, he wanted to earn some more money to leave for his family. However, now, unless there is divine intervention. Zhang Yuwei couldn't help but turn his head and look at the white signboard of the Immortal Cultivation Technique section. The signboard was quietly hanging there, looking extremely ordinary. However, for some reason, Zhang Yue felt that when he looked at the signboard, it seemed as though he was looking at something that could somehow calm his mind a little. His subconscious told him if he did not take a look, he would regret it. In the end, Zhang Yue stood in front of the bookshelf in the immortal cultivation technique section, silently standing that he did not know why he had walked over. Even more so, he could not understand why a successful entrepreneur would believe in such nonsense, immortal cultivation technique. It was just a myth, a legend, a lie that he mocked himself in his mind, but his left hand could not help but reach into the bookshelf and take out one of the books, Prajna Divine Technique, that he did not know why he did it. Perhaps it was to make himself give up or to relax his tense nerves during this period. Anyway, he did it. However, he could not proceed to the next step. Zhang Yue found that he could not open the book. This, Prajna Divine Technique, was apparently very light. It seemed to be lighter than other books of the same size and thickness, but it could not be opened. Zhang Yue stared blankly at the blue cover of the book, which had no other pictures other than the words, Prajna Divine Technique, in bewilderment. Why couldn't this book be opened? Zhang Yue put down The Little Prince in his other hand and tried to open the book with both hands. However, it was useless. It still could not be opened. Zhang Yue had never encountered such a strange thing in more than 40 years of his life. However, this was also faintly sending a message to Zhang Yue. This book did not seem to be an ordinary book. After being stunned for a moment, Zhang Yue picked up The Little Prince, stacked it on top of Prajna Divine Technique, and walked toward the front desk. That he didn't know why he wanted to buy a book that couldn't be opened, but he did. Perhaps this ordinary book could give him a glimmer of illusory hope for life. Zhang Yue comforted himself this way. After all, how much could such a book be worth? Thank you, that would be $300 million. The young store manager sitting at the counter informed Zhang Yue of this amount without even raising his head. Zhang Yue was slightly startled and repeated the question, "Boss, how much is it again?" This time, the young store manager Luo Xiu raised his head, $300 million. Well, to be precise, $340,000,000. The Little Prince is 40, and Prajna Divine Technique is 300 million. Listen to the full novel at FameTV.info, direct link in the description.